There has been considerable debate among criminologists about the proper definition of serial murder. The term serial murder was popularized in the 1970s by Robert Ressler, an investigator with the Behavioral Science Unit of the U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigation. The FBI originally defined serial murder as involving at least 4 events that take place at different locations and are separated by a cooling-off period. In most definitions now, however, the number of events has been reduced, and even the FBI lowered the number of events to 3 in the 1990s. The FBI's definition has been faulted because it excludes individuals who commit 2 murders and are arrested before they can commit more and individuals who commit most of their murders in a single location. Such criticisms have led many scholars worldwide to adopt the definition put forward by the National Institute of Justice, an agency of the U.S. Department of Justice, according to which serial murder involves at least 2 different murders that occur over a period of time ranging from hours to years. Criminologists have distinguished between classic serial murder, which usually involves stalking and is often sexually motivated, and spree serial murder, which is usually motivated by thrill-seeking. Although some serial murders have been committed for profit, most lack an obvious rational motive, a fact that distinguishes them from political assassinations and terrorism and from professional murders committed by gangsters. Serial murderers are assumed to kill for motives such as sexual compulsion or even recreation. In many cases, the killings are thought to give murderers a feeling of power which may or may not be sexual in nature, over their victims. Typical victims have included women, migrants, prostitutes, children, homosexuals, and vagrants. Serial murderers have attracted immense attention in popular culture, partly because they are perceived as personifications of evil. A serial killer is typically a person who murders 3 or more people, in 2 or more separate events over a period of time, for primarily psychological reasons. There are gaps of time between the killings, which may range from a few days to months, or many years. Born July 26, 1959 in Putnam, Connecticut, Michael Bruce Ross. He was the oldest of 4 children, having 2 younger sisters and a younger brother. His mother, who abandoned the family at least once, had been institutionalized, and beat all 4 of her children. Michael Bruce Ross was also molested by his teenage uncle, who took his own life when Ross was 6 years old. At age 12, Ross molested 2 girls. In response to his sexual behavior and curiosity, his father beat him as punishment. His mother would determine when Ross was punished, and his father would enforce the actual punishment. The farm boy from Brooklyn, con, sexual sadist, and Cornell University graduate went on a rape and murder spree in the early 1980s. Michael Bruce Ross was highly intelligent and performed well in school. He graduated from Killingly High School in Killingly, Connecticut, in 1977, and graduated from Cornell University in Ithaca, New York, where he studied economics, in May 1981. He became an insurance salesman and also exhibited increasingly antisocial behavior. Ross began stalking women in his sophomore year of college, and, in his senior year, he committed his first rape followed by his first murder soon after. On Thanksgiving Day, 1983, Ross accosted 19-year-old Robin S. on the grounds of a state hospital in Norwich. He forcefully pulled Robin S. into a wooded area and ordered her to remove her clothing. He then sexually assaulted her and, after ordering her to turn over on her stomach, strangled her. Before leaving, he covered her body with leaves. On June 13, 1984, Ross accosted 17-year-old Wendy Baribeau as she was walking along Route 12 in Lisbon. After a short conversation, he pulled Wendy Baribeau over a stone wall, forcing her to go with him into a wooded area that led to an open field. There he sexually assaulted her, forced her to turn over on her stomach, and then strangled her. On Easter Sunday, 1984, Ross picked up 14-year-old April Brunet and 14-year-old Leslie Shelley, who were hitchhiking on Route 138. Once the girls had entered his car, he drove them over their protests past their intended destination. When April Brunet tried to force the defendant to stop the car by threatening him with a knife, he disarmed her and continued into Rhode Island. At Beach Pond, he parked his car and bound both girls' hand and foot. He then untied April Brunet's feet and forced her to walk a short distance from his car, where he assaulted her sexually, turned her over on her stomach and strangled her. Returning to the car, the defendant killed Leslie Shelley without sexually assaulting her. He then placed the bodies of both girls in his car and drove back to Preston, Connecticut, where he deposited their bodies in a culvert. Ross, a Cornell University graduate who studied economics, confessed to the murder of all 4 women and 4 others during the same time period. At his trial, the defendant did not deny having committed the kidnappings, rapes, and murders, and asserted an insanity defense. 1987, Ross was convicted for the murders of 4 of the 8 women he confessed to killing. It took the jury 86 minutes of deliberations to convict him and only 4 hours to decide on his punishment. He was the first person executed in Connecticut since May 17, 1960, when Joseph Mad Dog Taborski was electrocuted for a spree of slayings. Between 1981 and 1984, Ross murdered 8 girls and women aged between 14 and 25 in Connecticut and New York. He was sentenced to death on July 6, 1987, in Connecticut by Judge G. Sarsfield Ford. In 2001, while on death row, Ross pleaded guilty to first-degree manslaughter for killing Paula Pereira in New York in 1982, and was sentenced to 8 1/3 to 25 years in prison. He spent almost 18 years on death row before his execution in May 2005. In the end, the man described as both monster and manipulator controlled his own fate. He had until 2001 to call off the execution by saying he wanted to pursue more appeals. He did not, and the series of 3 lethal drugs coursed through his veins. Osborne Correctional Institution Warden Christine Whidden announced Ross' death from a podium at 2:28. Shortly afterward, Gov. M. Jody Rill said Ross alone is responsible for his fate. Today is a day no one truly looked forward to, but then no one looked forward to the brutal, heinous deaths of those 8 young girls, Rill said. I hope that there is at least some measure of relief and closure for their families. Ross' body was removed from the prison by Dr. H. Wayne Carver II, the state's chief medical examiner, and 2 technicians to do an autopsy. The Second Circuit rejected both appeals about 5:30 p.m. Appeals soon followed to the U.S. Supreme Court, and all parties involved in the execution countdown remained on tenterhooks until just after 11 p.m. Visits consumed most of Ross' last day. He awoke about 5:45 a.m. and had a breakfast of oatmeal and grapefruit, Department of Corrections spokesman Brian Garnett said. Ross watched television and read newspapers until 8:10 a.m., when he was moved to the execution holding cell. It resembles his other open-barred cell at the old death row at Osborne Correction Institution, except that it is encased in plexiglass, with a circle of holes drilled midway down the front of the door so Ross could communicate back and forth with visitors. Where formerly Ross could hold hands with visitors, now he could not. Only priests were allowed physical contact, necessary so they could give him the Holy Eucharist, which Ross received at 9 a.m. Later he received last rites. Butler said he and Ross joked Thursday morning about the Hannibal Lecter death cell, a reference to the cannibal psychiatrist in the thriller movie Silence of the Lambs. Ross lunched on a cheeseburger and hash browns, and at 3 p.m. chose to have as his last meal the same thing all the other inmates at Osborne would be eating for dinner: turkey a la king with rice, mixed vegetables, white bread, fruits and a beverage. As he ate, protesters were on the last leg of their 5-day, 30-mile march from Hartford. Jim Whitten, 32 of Suffield, and Krista Elkovich, 26 of Suffield, were among those showing their support. Long story short, killing is wrong in any form, Elkovich said. Rachel Lawler, 20 and a student at St. Michael's College in Vermont, was in the middle of final exams but said she felt compelled to come down and show her opposition to the death penalty. "It's hard to believe it's really happening," she said. "It's hard to believe Connecticut is murdering someone." At 2:25 a.m., Ivy League killer Michael Ross, who fought for years to hasten his own death, became the first person to be executed in New England in 45 years. The execution of Michael Bruce Ross has been carried out. The death occurred at 2:25 am, Warden Christine Whitten said shortly after Ross was pronounced dead at the Osborne Correctional Institution in Somers, Connecticut. State officials said Ross was administered a chemical cocktail that sedated him, paralyzed his muscles and stopped his heart. By 12:30 a.m., the witnesses selected to view the execution boarded a van to take them to the prison's entrance. At 1:40 a.m., they entered the witness observatory. Ross was to be led to the execution chamber and strapped to a gurney at 1:30 a.m. A catheter was to be attached to each of his arms. The left one was to carry the fatal dose. The first injection was to be a sedative called thiopental sodium, administered in 2,500 milligrams to relax his body. The next, 100 milligrams of pancuronium bromide, is designed to paralyze him. The last, 120 milligrams of potassium chloride, is supposed to stop his heart and kill him. Once the lethal substance stops flowing into Ross' veins, a curtain would close over the witness observatory. It won't reopen. The last execution in Connecticut took place in 1960 and also involved a serial killer, Joseph Mad Dog Taborski. He did not prey on young women. He killed anyone who came into his path during a robbery. He confessed to 6 murders and was electrocuted on May 17, 1960. Ross' victims ranged from 14 to 25 years of age. The 2 youngest were 14-year-olds, April Brunet and Leslie Shelley. Thank you for watching Death Row.